Well, hi there. Welcome to my garden. I'm Elizabeth Hines from Total Wellness Health Coaching and the Autoimmune Free Cooking Club. And it is the end of the month. Actually, by the time you see this, it's the very beginning of October, but this is my end of September garden update for you. So started showing you these back in April when I planted my summer veggies. And my goal is to give you a monthly update throughout the year because here in the central part of North Carolina, we call it the Piedmont, we can typically keep some veggies going in our garden year round. We usually have fairly mild winters and we get to keep some fresh things growing. So I'm hoping to be able to show that to you. So this was filmed September 20th, I believe, and it was time to rip out some of the summer things. So here you see me getting rid of our cherry tomatoes, which there were lots of little green tomatoes on there, but what starts to happen this time of year is we get a lot of rain and they'll just burst and then they rot and it's really time for them to go, even though there may be some fruit still on. So those got all cleaned out. That actually took me about an hour and a half. I had quite a few tomato plants, and then I hoe everything up. I pull out the weeds. I try to get all the roots out, all the little, rotting tomatoes that are down there in the soil. I just clean it up as much as I can. And then I put in my soil amendments, which I've been using Daddy Pete's brand, cow manure and soil conditioner. And I just use my hoe or my long-handled three-pronged like rake. I almost called it a fork. And the fork comes later when you eat the veggies. And I just mix all that in really well, and then it'll be ready for planting my seeds. That one cherry tomato had grown totally out of the garden, and it was there's some shrubs to the side that you can't see. There's a nice little rabbit family that's living in there. They were probably eating lots of cherry tomatoes this summer. But we had plenty, so I was happy to share. I did in August plant some kale, broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, parsnips, cabbage, and green beans. And the green beans you can see there on the left. I'll show them up close. I'll show them to you up close in a little bit. But the rest are all basically little baby plants right now. But then I planted some more seeds on this day when I cleaned everything out. In my hand there, that's Rozol. It's rat poison, and we are using it to get rid of the voles that tunnel through my garden and eat my plants from the root up. They're nasty little critters, and that's just to take care of them. This is just an all-purpose granular fertilizer called Osmocote. It's just all I have. My favorite fertilizer for the garden is Neptune's Harvest, I believe is what it's called. It's a seaweed, all organic. It smells terrible, but it works really well. And I'm just out of it, so I've got to grab some more of that when I go to my garden center soon. So what I'm doing here is planting seeds. I transplanted a little bit. I still had some that had come up from my August planting that needed to be thinned out. And I did make a map. I drew a little map in my garden journal, so I know exactly what I planted where, which is very helpful. You can see there I'm wearing my trusty gardening overalls, but more importantly, I have my pruners with the holster that are just clipped onto my hip, and that is just the most convenient thing for when I'm doing any kind of yard work. I linked to those back in my very first gardening video, and I'll link to those again because I love them. They're super helpful. And if you're going to do any sort of gardening, I highly recommend you have a good pair of pruners and a holster. It really helps too. I'm planting carrots and parsnips there, and they're teeny tiny little seeds, and so I just sprinkle on a whole bunch, and then I'll thin them out as soon as they come up. So the clean out's all done, and let me just take a look at how things were looking about a week later. My iris are still blooming. I've deadheaded my daisies. They did so well this year, so now they're all ready to winter over. I cut back my knockout roses. They get really long and then they start to scratch against the windows. It sounds really creepy. It would be perfect for Halloween, but I don't particularly enjoy that. That chair through the window is where I sit and do my Bible study every morning, and I don't like the sound the roses on the window. You see a little bit of red on our maple tree right there. It makes me so excited. I love fall. It's my favorite season, and that tree turns bright red, and it's really tall. You can actually see it when you turn down our street, which is really fun. There's the rosemary that is harboring our rabbit family right now. Here's kind of a long-range view of what's going in the garden right now. A few mature plants and a whole bunch of little babies, and I'm going to take you inside and show you up close. Our plan is late winter, very early spring, kind of when it's transition time for the plants. We're going to build an actual real fence with a real gate because this older body is having a little bit of a hard time stepping over that rabbit fence. So we're committed to gardening. We love our house. We're not planning to leave, so planning to put in a real big kid fence, hopefully, in the next 6 months or so. So these 2 square beds were full of tomatoes, and now they're full of lettuce and spinach, and climb over the fence and take you inside. So when this was filmed, it's a week after the earlier part when I was cleaning everything out. And you can see there I have some little lettuce seedlings. So we'll let those come up. They need to have 2 pairs of true leaves, and then I can thin them. They're so fragile, so I'll probably let them get a little bit bigger before I thin them out. And I just put a whole bunch of different types of lettuce in there. Hopefully I'll be able to show it to you for sure. This bed has more of the same. It's so funny, just a slight different amount of light, and the seeds germinate at a different pace. You can see one tiny little seedling in there, but they'll come up too. And these were a few kale plants that I had planted in August, and I almost ripped them up when I was ripping up my tomatoes, but then I saw them in there at the last minute. This bed has a bunch of broccoli, cauliflower, and I think cabbage, and there's some kind of pest eating those. So when I head to the garden center, I'm going to snip a couple of those leaves and ask them what they recommend. I try to stay organic, so I love some sort of organic pest control because I want to get my veggies. So we got all kinds of, I think these were parsnips that I planted on this side. I can't remember, and of course I don't have my garden journal with me to tell you, but I did plant some more things on that side. It's so funny, obviously a rabbit came through and ate on that side. So I had more broccoli, and it was all gone from that side of the bed, which was hilarious. So I planted some more things. This is more cauliflower down here, and at that end there was another cherry tomato, and so I just planted a few more seeds. Now we come to green bean land, which again, these were planted in August, and look how great they are. I've had several harvests already. These are just a bush bean, your standard green bean. They taste really good. My whole family loves them. I was thinking I would grow enough to can this year, but I don't think going to happen. This makes me think of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. When you see it down from that view, they kind of hide in there, so you really have to get down in and lift up the leaves and look around. But I've been harvesting at least once a week, like every 5 to 6 days. I typically get 30 to 40 beans, so we're having fresh green beans from the garden about once a week. And I planted some more right before we headed out of town for a week because I knew they would germinate, they would be fine while we were gone. And they did, in fact, and the plants came up, but then I saw that they had all been chewed off, so I planted a few more on that day I cleaned out. So a week later, this is what you see, which again, if you have children, plants and vegetables, it's so fun to see how they go from seed. See that brown was the seed coat, so it's still kind of hanging onto that leaf. It's just super fun. It's magical to see how you plant this hard little seed and it turns into a plant that then makes you food. I just think it's fascinating, and from the experience with my children, I know that they love it. These are my banana peppers that have been going strong since about June, I think. Still getting lots and lots of those constantly. Down here, I had cucumbers, and I planted a couple more green beans because why not? Over here, we have 2 carrots. You can see those actually look like carrot tops. That's what those are. Something keeps getting into this bed, and I think it may be deer. Because you see that branch of my pepper plant has been basically ripped off, and some other of my little seedlings have been chewed down to the nubs. So that rabbits, could also be deer, could also be a raccoon. Not sure what's happening to this bed, but I've got some kale in there, cabbage, parsnips, and carrots. And I'm hoping my parsnips and carrots will really come up. But something is enjoying eating them right now, so we'll see. And then down finally at this end of the bed, I planted onion seeds, which usually you plant onion sets, but I couldn't find any. So I planted seeds, and if all goes well, I should be able to harvest them next June. So that's really going to try my patience, but I'm excited to try something new. Gardening for me is like, it's really like a great big experiment. I mean, I know some things are going to do really well here where I live in North Carolina, and other things, some years they do great and some years they don't. Like I haven't had green beans for a couple of years. They've not germinated, or the birds picked the seeds out of the ground. I haven't had a successful green bean crop for a couple of years, and then this year they're great again. So a pack of seeds is not super expensive. A bag of soil, overall, it's a very low investment to potentially have a pretty great return. And even if your return isn't good, it's a fun exercise to go through. And science is really about the process. It's not necessarily about getting the perfect result or even the result that you were expecting. So I highly encourage you to give some gardening a try. You start with pots on your porch. You can plant things in your front yard, wherever you have the most sun, and hopefully you can grow some of your own veggies. Well, I thank you so much for joining me on this garden tour today. I'm loving showing this to you. It's motivating me to keep it cleaned out, to keep the weeds under control, to keep pursuing and planting year round, and my family is benefiting from that. So you're holding me accountable whether you know it or not. If you have any questions about gardening, I will find out the answers from an expert for you. I am not an expert, but I'm happy to help you and encourage you in any way that I can. Thank you for joining me today on this little garden tour. I really appreciate you being here. If you haven't already subscribed, consider doing that, please. That helps our channel to continue to grow. I typically post one recipe every week. It's usually a paleo recipe, dairy-free, grain-free, refined sugar-free, all that great stuff. Really good tasting food that's actually good for you. That's what I usually do. But occasionally I'll bring you some fun other content like these garden updates. So thanks again for joining me today, everybody, and I'll see you next week from the kitchen.